Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to talk about moral health in Black communities and why whenever you attempt to critique the moral health of Black communities, it's immediately deemed respectability politics. So for a very long time, probably as far back as the 1860s, that's how deep this goes, Black scholars and Black lay scholars alike have tried critiquing and drawing attention to a lot of the issues that we see going on in Black communities, like single motherhood rates, child mortality rates, health, obesity, addiction to things like alcohol, drugs, gambling, financial basically no financial intelligence or little to no financial intelligence in certain lower middle class Black communities. And whenever these issues are brought up in order to critique their cause, it's always put under this sort of umbrella of respectability politics. Why? Why is that when we talk about these issues in Black communities, is it respectability politics? Why is it so bad to say, hey, these things are not good for our homes and our communities? And that should be common sense. It shouldn't be a respectability politic to say these things. So first, I think it's important to note what is respectability politic. From the way that I understand it, respectability politic is when you attempt to critique the condition of lower middle class Black neighborhoods, middle to lower middle class Black communities, without acknowledging the structural racism and the white supremacy that is the cause for a lot of these issues. And I say a lot of and not all because there are some that structural racism and white supremacy have nothing to do with, and that is a hill that I am willing to die on. This is the stance that I feel like I have to take, that it is not respectability politics to call out these issues. Yes, we can say the history of slavery and Jim Crow and structural racism and discrimination from the lowest parts of society all the way up through federal government has impacted and has directly caused a lot of the issues that we saw in Black communities back then and that we still continue to see today to some extent. However, there are things that are caused and perpetuated by Blacks within our own communities, and that is not respectability politics. That is a hard truth. There are some things that are caused by structural racism and the history of structural racism in this country, and then there are some things that structural racism, white supremacy, the history of slavery has nothing to do with, and that is morality. That is morality. That is the value system within a cultural group. That racism has nothing to do with those things and how we perform those things. Now, one might sort of retort to that, well, who dictates morality? Whose standard of morality are we living by? We need to have some standard. I don't understand that question. There has to be some kind of standard, because without it, what kind of society are we looking at? There needs to be some standard, because looking at the condition of things in lower middle class Black neighborhoods now and Black communities now, there is no standard, and that's part of why there's so many issues there. That's part of why. It's not the whole reason why, but there's part of why there's so many issues there, like devaluing two-parent households. I don't care, I will die on this hill. They are important. Scholars will back up the importance of two-parent households for kids and for communities. Each household is like its own little society. If all of the members of that little society is not functioning well, and then you take a full neighborhood of a bunch of these little societies that are dysfunctional, that entire community is going to be a mess. And then you take multiple communities like that, where the same conditions are prevalent in all of them, that society is going to be a mess. So each individual household is very important to the sort of interwoven workings of the entire community. If one household is a mess and then the next one is a mess and the next one is a mess, the whole community is messed up. Then the whole society is messed up. So two-parent households are very important. They're important for the health of the children. They're important for the parents in the situation. They are important for their communities. They're important. And saying that doesn't put one in proximity to whiteness. It doesn't. I don't understand why that puts you in proximity to whiteness, or you're trying to sort of win some kind of white approval. This is a common sense thing. Healthy families are good for society. Common sense, not respectability politics. And that is a moral issue that we're seeing within Black communities, lower middle class Black communities, is devaluing healthy family structures and healthy family dynamics. And when you call these things out, it's, well, that's respectability politics. Let's talk about why that is the way that it is. Okay. Even if we do talk about why we see these issues and what's causing them, and let's say if we were to give some sort of solution to these problems, whatever solutions there may be. Oh, okay, well, the men are having a hard time finding employment, and that's why they turn to the streets. Okay, let's solve that problem. Let's create a program where the men can go and get a low cost of free education so they can then be put into the workforce. Now, the responsibility is shifted onto you. You have to actually go and take advantage of said program. If you don't, who is to blame? And that is just the fact of the matter. So even if we were to give all of these solutions to these problems, and I'm looking at them here because I don't want to get sidetracked. Even if we were to give solutions to all of these problems, the onus of taking advantage of them would still be on the community that they're being provided to. And we have these solutions. We have workforce solutions, the federally funded organization that's across the country. I believe it's across the country. It might just be in New York. I could be wrong about that, but workforce solutions. And there's other programs like them where you can go and get job skills, job training, and then they even help get you job placement. That is something that is there for low income, lower middle economic class people to go and take advantage of, and oftentimes we don't take advantage of it. The women do. That much is very true. The women do. The men often do not. Another moral issue that goes on in our communities, crime rates. High crime rates. And often when we talk about crime rates, we often talk about the petty crime, stealing, robbery. And when we ask, well, why is there so much petty crime in Black communities and lower middle class Black communities? The retort is, well, because Black men can't get jobs, and that's why they turn to the streets. Okay, fine. Why aren't they able to get jobs? Well, they don't have the workplace skills. Why don't they have the workplace skills? Well, they don't have the education. Why don't they have that? Because of structural racism. It's always something. It's always something. But like I said, we can acknowledge that there are things, there are causes, and then there's effects. There are some things that have caused a lot of the conditions that we see in Black communities in the past, and still right up to today. There are some things that you cannot blame structural racism for, you cannot blame white supremacy for, you cannot blame the humiliation of slavery for, the past for. And when I say crime in Black communities, I am not talking about some petty thief stuff, because that happens all over the world and there's reasons for it all over the world. Here in Black communities, the reason for it is often these men are uneducated and cannot get jobs, and thus they turn to petty crime. Let's talk about the other type of crime that is very prevalent in Black communities. That is the murder rates. That is the rates of Black women who are losing their lives to their husbands and to their boyfriends. The rate of young Black men that are being killed in the streets. And why these young men are turning to the streets, because their dad isn't in the home. That takes me back to point number one. We are devaluing two-parent households. Egregious crime within Black communities. What's the cause of that? What causes Black men to go and murder Black women at rates that are significantly and drastically higher than any other racial group? Can we blame structural racism for that? A retort to that could be, patriarchy. Society devalues women's lives and blah, blah, blah. It's always some other excuse and some other reason why, except for that person, their low morals, their low principles, they're having no respect for human life. It's always some other reason. And that's a part of the issue that I take with respectability politic. It is not respectability politic to say that that's a problem. And that racism has nothing to do with it. This is an issue with our men. Our men are demoralized. So much so that murder rates are incredibly high in Black communities. Now on to the issue of hypersexuality and promiscuity. This is another morally bankrupt area in Black communities. Sex, careless sex, sex with multiple partners, sex that results in children by multiple partners. It is not respectability politic to say that that is not good for the kids involved, and that is not good for the households, that is not good for the greater community. Having babies all over the place by a bunch of different people, that is a problem. And saying that is not respectability politics. Because what on earth does a white person have to do with you rolling around in bed with another person and procreating with them outside of some sort of family planning or familial structure? What does white people have to do with that? Were they there in the room when you decided to go and make a kid? No. So what do they have to do with that exactly? That is the one that gets me. How do we make single parenthood in Black communities somehow white supremacy's fault? Who on earth, which white supremacist was in the room when the action was taking place? That is a moral issue. That is a cultural issue. That is a moral issue. We've demoralized sexual relationships and how they are supposed to happen. We've demoralized two-person partner relationships where you're together and you're making kids within that relationship and within that house. That's a moral issue that has nothing to do with structural racism. I don't care. I will fight and die and rest in peace on that hill. These are issues that really bug me because we are very quick to place the blame and the onus and the responsibility of these issues onto white liberals to fix, rather than saying there are some issues that society as a whole needs to address, that our society here in America as a whole needs to address. Structural racism's part, which we have made incredible strides to address those issues, and no one can deny it. There has never been a better time in this country to be Black or to be a Black woman. There might still be these things in society, but there's never been a better time in this country to be in a marginalized group. That's another hill that I will fight and die on as well. Life is very good. As compared to some other eras in this country, it's very, 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 very good to be Black and a woman right now. So we can address certain issues that still need to be fixed, but we can also say these are issues happening within our own cultural group that we're perpetuating and we're responsible for fixing within our own cultural group. Leave white people out of it. This has nothing to do with them. How many people you're having sex with and making babies with has nothing to do with white people. That is not a structural racism issue. That is not a, well, if white people this and if slavery didn't that, then we wouldn't this. The practice of having multiple babies by multiple women goes way back. We can go all the way back to the 1000s, circa year 1099, before the Renaissance started in the 1100s. Let's go all the way back to the African continent before Europeans started showing up. How many Black men were having babies by a bunch of different women? And yes, some can call that polygamy. Well, that was polygamy. That's different. No, not really. It's one guy having babies by a bunch of women, being imprudent and having no temperance whatsoever. This is a very ancient practice within our cultural group that we have not addressed ever, and it's high time that we address it. These are moral issues that have very little to do with whiteness, with white people, with the history of slavery. Some of these issues have been plaguing Black people since before slavery even started, like the example that I just gave you, babies all over the place by different women. That is a very old world problem that's coming through even to today. Just because it's something that our ancestors practiced does not mean that we still need to practice it today. With advancement comes advancement in knowledge, intellectual improvement. We should be able to look at the past and scrutinize and say which things worked for us, which things were good and which things were not, and leave them in the past. Having babies by a bunch of different women is one of the things we should leave in the past. And a lot of that, half of that blame is on the women too. You have control over who you're making a father. That is the one power that women have that no one can take away from you. You decide who's going to become a dad and who is not. Who is going to have the privilege, might I add, of being a father and who will not have it. And far too many Black women are reckless with that power. With great power comes great responsibility. Far too many are irresponsible with it. They're making fathers out of men who do not deserve to be dads. So there's a 50-50 blame there because it takes two to tango. Two people to roll around in bed and make a baby. So on to the issue of low financial intelligence. This is another one that I think has very little to do with white supremacy and structural racism. This is another issue that I see plaguing Blacks even long before slavery became a problem. Materialism has been an issue among Black people long before slavery became a problem. Again, if we go way back, to the Middle Ages, when Europeans were first touching down on the continent, Europeans were not able to penetrate the interior of Africa. They had a hard time even getting onto the continent itself, because a lot of those people who lived along that region were a part of very large and very vast empires. They had militaries of their own. Africans had militaries of their own. So Europeans weren't just walking up to Africa and going on in. They were getting killed. Europeans could not penetrate the interior of Africa. It was impossible. There was disease in those jungles, animals in those jungles that was killing them, and hostile natives who lived in those jungles that was killing them. It was impossible for them to get in. There was some sort of material gain for Africans on the continent to let the Europeans in. Europeans could not penetrate the interior of the continent without the help of other Africans. It was impossible. They were getting murked in there. Period. End of discussion. They were getting killed. So they bartered and they traded in order to gain entry into the continent with the help of those coastal Africans. Materialism has been a problem that has plagued Black people for a very long time. And those white people back then, those Europeans back then, took advantage of this low morale with finances that Blacks had back then. It was far too easy for African aristocracy during that time to trade the lives of other Africans for material gain. That to me says that there was low morale when it came to finances. There was a lot of materialism and very low morality that made it possible for those Europeans to take advantage of that situation for their own benefit, trade whatever goods they traded for human beings. And African aristocracy, the rich Africans during the Middle Ages, were integral to establishing colonialism on the continent and slavery as we understand it here in America today. They were a foundational part of that. It would not have happened had they not had this greedy, materialistic approach to politics. This is still something that we see happening in Black communities today. Materialism, devaluing the life of each other over material gain. We see this in gang violence over drugs, gang violence over money. It's modern day tribalism. Tribalism is ancient, and white supremacy, structural racism did not create it on the continent. It didn't create it here in our communities today. Tribalism is an issue that has been happening all over the world. Only difference is people in other parts of the world outside of the continent have taken the necessary steps to address the issue of tribalism and put an end to it. And even today, it still happens in many cultures that have sort of evolved past that. But we still see it happening right up to today, both on the continent and in the African diaspora. That is a moral issue that goes way, way, way back. Far back to the Middle Ages and possibly even before. Structural racism has nothing to do with that. Nothing whatsoever. With us devaluing each other's lives over material gain, we still do it today. Drawing attention to these issues, I keep coming back to this because that is the nucleus of this whole conversation. Drawing attention to these issues is not respectability politics. It's respectability politics when we say, well, behave better so white people can respect us, and behave better so like the rest of the country won't look at us with pity. That's respectability politics. Saying, hey, we've got some issues going on in our community that we need to address because this is not healthy. We're dying out here. Our mortality rates are high. That isn't respectability politics to say that. These are issues, and they do need to be talked about, and they do need to be addressed, and we do need to differentiate which issues structural racism has to do with and how the greater American society can address that together, because that's an American issue. And then you have a Black American issue, which is specifically what is happening within this particular ethnic group. What exactly do we expect the greater majority of America to do about what is happening within our own group, our own ethnic group? What could they do? Well, I don't think we would like it very much if they were to come storming in and forcing us to do certain things and behave a certain way. I don't think we would appreciate that very much. So what exactly are they going to do except throw up their hands and go, okay, well, we don't really have much to say about this. The single parenthood rates are skyrocketing, and that's not something that structural racism has much to do with. That's a moral issue. Murder rates in our communities are through the roof, like they never have been before. That is not something that structural racism has to do with. White people can't come in and say, hey, black people, stop killing each other. We wouldn't like it if they were to do that anyway. Even if they were to do that, we would not appreciate that. That is a moral issue. I personally do not think Black Americans, by and large, know what Black culture is. I don't think Black Americans know what Black culture is, by and large. And I have a few reasons for thinking that. The first takes me back into my own childhood. Growing up in school, I would often be asked by other Black children why I talked white. That would be the question posed to me. Why do you talk white? Why do you dress white? Why do you act white? Keep those questions in mind, because those questions followed me into high school and then post-graduation into life. Whenever I would go around my family members, maybe at some sort of family get-together, maybe some of my cousins invited some of their friends, and I would speak to them, and they would also look at me like, why are you talking like that? Why do you sound the way that you sound? You're suspicious. Why do you dress like that? Why do you talk like that? Why do you act like that? You're trying to be white. That was the response that I would get by just existing. And that has been a question of why that happens. Why does that happen? That question has followed me for some time now. And I've gotten to the point where I've decided, okay, this means something. This says to me, whenever I hear a Black person say this, this says to me that they, one, don't think that it's Black culture to speak well, to speak proper. I don't like saying that either, because people have their own respective dialects, and speaking proper just means speaking standard English, and standard English is the language that we use to communicate cross-culturally. Outside of these spaces where we need to communicate cross-culturally, it's okay to not use such perfect English, and that just goes the world over. I don't think anyone in the world speaks their language so perfectly every single day, even when they are in informal situations. However, even still, why is it that speaking with basic good cadence and good diction and good grammar is seen as being white, or is seen as something that only white people do? And again, this is something that I experienced starting in my early childhood, elementary, all the way up and through to adulthood now. Why is it that speaking with good cadence, good diction, good grammar, all of these things, why is it that far too many Black Americans see that as being white, see that as being something that white people do and not Black people? That says something to me about the way that we view what Blackness is and what Black culture is. It says that we do not have a healthy view of what Blackness is. Our view of what Blackness is heavily influenced by Black stereotype, and too many of us have adopted Black stereotypes as being intrinsic to Blackness, like speaking poorly, not speaking with good cadence, not speaking with good diction, not speaking with good grammar. Why is not speaking well Black? That should strike you as odd. It strikes me as odd. Why is speaking well white? Why is not speaking well Black? These are stereotypes, and far too many of us have adopted them as being intrinsic to being Black. The same goes with how we dress. Like I said, I've been asked as well, why do you dress white? Now, this is what I wear pretty much on a daily basis. I'm wearing like a sweater and some pants. Sometimes I wear boots. Sometimes I wear sneakers. Sometimes I wear heels. But Why do you dress white? And I'm guessing that means, why aren't your clothes either garish and very loud, or why isn't your clothing and your way of dressing kind of haphazard? Frankly, let's be frank. When you look at the way that men in lower middle class black neighborhoods dress, it is often a little haphazard. Pants are falling off. The shirt is maybe a size or two too big. Clothes are not fitting right. Well, that was back in the early 2000s. Today, the shirts are sometimes a little small, wife beaters, paired with a pair of ripped skinny jeans that are too small to be pulled up all the way so they sit on the legs. A little haphazard. And then the women often dress a little scantily clad. So a lot of cleavage showing, maybe clothes that are very, very tight and close to the skin for the women. So there's a level of immodesty with the way that men and women dress. And is this policing black bodies? I don't think so. No, I don't think that it's policing black bodies to say, hey, when you're out in public, there's a certain way that we dress when we're going out to face other people. When you dress, you're not just dressing for yourself when you're going outside. You're also dressing for the rest of society, because other people got to look at you and pass you and be in the same space as you as well. So I don't think that it's policing black bodies to say, hey, when we go outside of our homes, let's make sure that we're dressed decent. What is decent? Define decent. Just dressed in a way that is respectful of other people too, of both yourself and others. And it isn't very respectful of others to go outside with your boobs falling out your front and your butt falling out your back, or a pair of tight leggings on, so tight that we can see the shape of everything going on down there. That isn't very decent, and that's not very respectful of other people either. And there was a time in Black America where you could not leave your house dressing like that. Early 60s, I would say. 50s, you know what? Even further back than that. It really started to change around the late 60s into the 70s, where you started getting into this sort of psychedelic sort of fashion where everything was a bit more out than it ought to be. But prior to that, those 60s and on back, there was a certain way that you dressed in society. And that was not, to me, dictated by white people. That was just etiquette. That was social protocol. And we can kind of go around in circles all day. Well, who dictates etiquette? Who dictates social protocol? Who is in control of those things? Even if white people had not early on sort of set this kind of standard for how we need to dress and how we need to conduct ourselves in society, there still needs to be a standard. There still needs to be one. And it should not be the one that's detrimental to society, like the one that we're seeing in Black communities. That should not be the standard. So the opposite of that should be the standard. Let's go in the other direction and see what that does for us. So either way it goes, regardless of who is setting the standard, a standard needs to be set by somebody. So the fact that we have this kind of knee-jerk reaction to any Black person who does not fit into these stereotypes, that tells me that we have not fully cleansed and washed our brains of what racists during the slave era, during the antebellum era, during the post-slavery era have decided Black people are. We still today in our minds have it in our heads that Black people are stupid. That is why we react the way that we do whenever we hear a Black person who speaks with good diction and good cadence and good grammar. We go, what? Why do they talk like that? Because in our minds, we are still convinced that we're stupid, and that is what being Black is. That is not Black culture. Too many of us think that it is. It is not Black culture to be dumb. It is not Black culture to not speak well. It is not Black to have poor grammar, poor diction, poor cadence, and poor social etiquette. That is not Black. Those are stereotypes, and they need to be unlearned. It should not be shocking for us to come across another Black person who has good home training, as it's called. That shouldn't be shocking. That should be normal. Okay, here's a Black person who is not a Black stereotype. Here's a Black person who has not internalized and made intrinsic to how they express their Blackness these stereotypes coming out of racist white America from the past. They have not done that. And that should be the standard for other Black Americans too. But it isn't. And we keep running around in these circles. Well, who set that standard? Forget about it. Time for a new standard to be set. Time for us to redefine what we think Black culture is. Time for us to redefine what we think Blackness is and what being Black is. Anyway, thank you for sticking with me to the end of this video. I know it's a long one, but thank you anyway if you watched all the way to the end. If you have not already, do subscribe to my channel. That really helps me continue to make these videos. Do share. If there's any part of this video that you like the most, you can take that one particular part and remix it and share it to other platforms. YouTube now has the function to do that. Like, subscribe, comment, tell me what you think. Did you experience some of these things? Are you one of those blacks who's kind of outside the proverbial box of what we think blackness is? How do you feel about it? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe to my channel. Follow me on all platforms at Zaria Simmons, and I'll see you in the next one.